All right, Dan Pizzuta is here, one of the most thoughtful writers going. He writes for the 33rd team. Dan, this time of year, it's June 26th, it's noon. Are you just in the thick of NFL research? Because everybody else is like, whoa, the NFL's dead period. You are locked in on a bunch of different stuff. You did some salary cap analysis recently. You've done we're going to do sleeper MVP candidates here in a second. Like, you are locked in on June 26th, Dan.
Yeah, I don't really stop. Writing multiple times a week for the 33rd team. I just finished work on the FTN football almanac, formerly the Football Outsiders almanac. I did 4 chapters there, the whole NFC North. So that's a whole different beast of football research. But yeah, that's straight from the draft, heading right into now. So yeah, the football research does not stop at any point.
What's funny is that, and I feel this way, I was actually looking at some college rosters a second ago, before I started prepping for the show. But what's funny is that this is actually the time to do the research because we finally know the
Right.
rosters. And like for me, it's really funny how much content there is. Like, oh, way too early power rankings in like March, and it's like, well, let's just see here. Like, we don't know, and I've come to view every season as more patchwork year by year than I did maybe 5 years ago, where I used to just look at cores, and I used to look at I didn't look at things like special teams, things that don't develop until August, basically, June, July, August. And so this is the time to look at it. And I want to ask you, I'll leave this wide open because I remember a thread Josh Hermsmeyer did years ago where he basically said, like, what's the most fascinating thing you've read about football in the past couple of years? And the thread was great. And maybe I'll fire that back up and leave it open ended. But I'm curious, with you doing all this research, what's the most interesting thing you've learned about football recently?
So it's kind of basically a trend that I think is going to be continuing. It's one thing that I saw with like a bunch of really fun offenses the past couple years, and I think it's really going to continue this year is how often teams are going to be using pistol.
Oh,
And that's just kind of like the Rams completely shifted their
yeah.
offense like in the second half of the year. I think from the time Matthew Stafford was acquired until like week 6 of last year, they used 0 snaps of pistol. Then they ended up like with a 15% snap rate
Whoa.
in pistol last season. So it's just kind of a way, especially with some of these college quarterbacks coming in, where you're just marrying some of that under center and the shotgun. You're just kind of getting the best of both worlds there. And I think we're going to see more teams kind of start to do that. Like the Falcons with Arthur Smith were big.
Yeah.
Miami was a big team. The Chicago did that last year. I would kind of expect Caleb Williams to be doing that a little more because Seattle also did that. Now they have Shade Waldron over there.
Yeah.
So I think pistol and the way that kind of expands some of the things that these NFL offenses can do, kind of marrying the run and the pass, have a little more of the under center play action concepts while you're still in shotgun technically. I think that's going to be one of the more fascinating things I'm looking at over the next year.
It sort of fell out of popularity almost for no reason. And you think about the offensive minds who brought it in. Andy Reid hired Chris Holt, I believe, who was a Nevada coach,
Yep.
who was a consultant to basically help install the pistol. That was around the time that Colin Kaepernick and Jim Harbaugh were bringing it. And then Kyle Shanahan, Mike Shanahan, and RG3 in Washington. And so, like, you think about that, the fact that it actually, and it provides so much flexibility. I've thought about it. It's funny. I was actually running a little pistol in Madden a couple months ago. Not that that means anything, but it just feels weird. Like, it feels
Yeah.
weird. But because you just know I should either be in shotgun or under center. It feels weird. It looks weird, but it provides you with so much flexibility. I'm surprised it worked its way out of the game over the last decade, and it's not a surprise it can come back.
Yeah, and I think it's one of those things where at one point it probably was a little limited about what teams were trying to do out of it. But now I think teams are way more creative, especially offensively, with some of the guys that we have. Like you look at what McVay did from pistol, like they completely figured that run game and they were able to do a lot of the duo and gap run scheme out of that pistol, and I think that kind of opened up their passing game a little more. Matthew Stafford was running a lot of quick game out of pistol.
Mhm.
I think there's just the creativity from there I think is expanding also when it might have been a little limited, doing some read option and things like that when it first came into the NFL.
All right, so I want to get to some of the salary cap stuff you've been doing, kind of piggybacking off of the conversation I had with Jeremy Fowler last week about where the rise in spending will be, all that, and a lot of the questions I had were answered by your piece in a really great way, even though it's just literally parallel tracks. It's not like you were sitting there to listen to my pod being like, let's do this. Like, no, but it's a conversation I wanted to have. But I wanted to do sleeper MVP candidates with you first, partly because you also wrote a great piece about Anthony Richardson. You also wrote a piece about kind of breakout candidates next year, which obviously sometimes dovetails with sleeper MVPs. I'll start here. Your number one sleeper MVP is who, Dan?
Yeah, I mean, it's tough to not say Anthony Richardson, especially when you look at
Yeah.
like what a sleeper candidate for MVP really looks like. Because like when
Hmm.
we look at MVP, it for 15 straight years, it's been a quarterback. They've won
Yep.
at least 11 games. And this is from friend Cleve TA on Twitter. Used to be a coworker, one of the best, I think,
Mhm.
gambling minds that we kind of have. And he kind of broke this down of what quarterbacks are. It's quarterbacks with 11 wins, and none of them have a win total of like under 8.5 before the season. So these are teams we kind of expect to be pretty good, and that's who wins MVP. And most of those quarterbacks, as you would expect, are near the top of the MVP odds. But once you get down a little bit further, yeah, Anthony Richardson is sitting there at like 30-1, and this is a team, and it's hard to really dive into what Richardson did well. It's still a lot of like based on traits and kind of projecting a little bit, but you see what he did really well. And there was a lot of, just that the pocket feel that you kind of hoped he would
Mhm.
transfer from college. I think it immediately showed up in the NFL. There was no panic there. And I think that's something that is going to raise the floor of what he can do. And then I'm more optimistic because of what Shane Steichen did with Gardner Minshew,
Mhm.
right? If
Yes,
they can get almost
1,000,000%.
to the playoffs with Gardner Minshew and how they kind of reshaped that offense around quick passing, and Minshew doesn't have, the biggest arm, and what they were able to do there, I'm very optimistic about what the offense can potentially build around once Anthony Richardson is there for a full season.
Here's why you mentioned the traits and you mentioned the optimism and you mentioned a bunch of things I was about to say. But the reason that I'm buying this is because okay, so we look at the combine and we look at the tape and we look at the athleticism, all of the things we're saying, okay, we're projecting forward. But then in that small sample size in which he played, Steichen provided a proof of concept that this is going to
Yeah.
work, and it was only a month. But like obviously the legs, obviously beating the Texans and running for 2 touchdowns, and as you said, the pocket presence, like it was all there to the point that I don't think that there's listen, over a 17 game season, there's going to be a lot of questions that need to be asked. And there's going to be a lot of adjustments to all that stuff. But like, I feel like there's been a proof of concept. And once you see that with the athleticism, then you project forward and say, okay, this is going to work. The fact that they got basically the same record, and not basically the same record as the Jaguars with Gardner Minshew, shows that Shane Steichen is a good coach, shows that the rest of the roster is there, shows there's an infrastructure there. And it's funny because maybe this is unfair, but I'm looking around at the Eagles and saying, "Oh, Shane Steichen was more important to that operation than I thought." And so I'm buying all the Colt stock I can. And
Yeah.
I did an exercise a couple weeks ago. I love to do who can win the Super Bowl? Like who can win the Super Bowl? Who has a path to the Super Bowl? The Colts have a path to the Super Bowl without a doubt. And like all it takes is their ultra athletic, um, poised quarterback delivering on his promise. It's not that far fetched, and then you just everything flows from there. And so are they more likely to win the Super Bowl than the Texans? Probably not, but it's not out of their own possibility at all.
Yeah, absolutely. You just kind of look at just what they were able to do last year. And like it wasn't a great offense, but it was like
No.
about league average, which is amazing for what they were able to kind of do on the fly. And yeah, like I'm with you. I'm buying like all the Shane Steichen stock I can. There were some real creative things that they did on those first couple games with Richardson. Again, the feel in the pocket, like he had an above average sack rate, but he lost the fewest EPA per sack just because like he never got hit in the pocket like in a way that was like blindsided him. And
Mhm.
so I did a podcast with Robert Mays for the
Mhm.
Athletic Football Show, and we were looking at just going back and looking at the AFC South, watching
Mhm.
Anthony Richardson in the pocket and watching like Will Levis in the
Yeah.
pocket, who and, like those are just they're playing two different games. And I think just that what Richardson does just kind of really raises the floor. And I think when you put all the athletic traits and things that they were able to do on top, it really is like it's going to be exciting to watch, and it's going to be fun. And again, if they can get near 9, 10 wins. Like he's going to be in the conversation.
Levis, I just need to see so much more from him.
Yeah.
Like, and Brian Callahan can do it. We this is a pro Brian Callahan podcast. We've had him on. I believe in him, but like it was a Pittsburgh game where Levis just kept trying to throw the same version of the same interception like 4 times until Pittsburgh finally said, "Okay, we'll do it. We'll pick off this pass." Like that just showed me that it was just, is a young guy. It's a young play. Well, Levis is a young player playing young. Richardson is a young player playing like mid-career to me. It just, and again, in that
Yeah.
small
No,
sample
I
size,
agree
he
with
played
that.
less, but like I just think that the floor is so much higher with Richardson because of the athleticism, because of the poise he had. So that's it for me. All right. So you mentioned a guy who's my first sleeper candidate, and maybe this is just crazy. Maybe he's not a sleeper. Maybe I think he's an MVP candidate, but maybe sleeper is the wrong term for it. But I'm going to go for it just because of the odds. Which, by the way, same at most sports books is the same odds as Anthony Richardson. So I'll if Richardson's a sleeper, this guy's a sleeper. You already mentioned him, Matthew Stafford.
Yeah.
So 32 big time throws last year, fifth most, and had a 2% turnover worthy play rate, which is second according to PFF, behind only Dak Prescott. He was so good last year. And one of the things, Dan, the mistake we always make, I think the media is always a year late to stuff that doesn't like non-cowboy stuff. Unless somebody wins a Super Bowl, we're always kind of a year late. And so I think that Stafford and like our friend Steven Ruiz, guys like that, were saying, look at these throws, look at these throws, look at these throws. Everybody was kind of asleep the last 2 years on the Rams until the Puka breakout. I think this is the year with expectations. They're going to win a ton of games. Stafford's going to get the credit that he's been due the last year and a half because of that. He also had, and I was surprised by this, you know that only Mahomes had a higher drop rate for his receivers last year than Stafford? And we talked, and it's very close. I believe Mahomes' rate was 6.9, Stafford was 6.7. We talked so much about Mahomes' receivers letting him down. Obviously, this conversation is very different with Stafford. I'm just saying that he had a high drop rate last year. That'll regress a little bit. Every single metric shows that Stafford is going to have an awesome year. And if they win 12 games, and again, this is also narrative based, I think the national media doesn't think the Rams are going to be that good. They are. They have one of the best coaches of his era. They have a really good roster. They've rebuilt that defense, and so I think they're going to win a bunch of games for a team that I think is going to be someone's going to get credit for it. And I wouldn't be surprised nationally if it was Matthew Stafford.
Yeah, yeah. I was going to go Stafford too because he hits the same qualifications that Richardson does. That 8.5 win total and about 30 to 1 to win. And yeah, like you said, it's just going to be like if there is a dark horse kind of candidate, right? It's going to be one of those narrative driven ones. And if the Rams are good again, I think Stafford is going to get the credit there because of what he's been able to do to transform some of that offense. We kind of talked about what Sean McVay was able to do, how they really in 2023, it took the Sean McVay offense is completely different than even like the first year of Stafford when like they ran a ton of empty and
Mm-hmm.
Stafford was just vertical shots out of empty, which is like more than we'd really ever seen before. But when he came over, he just put pieces in that offense that
Mm-hmm.
weren't available to the offense before with Jared Goff. And I think that has continued. So I wouldn't be surprised if the Rams are good again. I think everybody wrote them off last year. People thought they were going to be one of the worst. I think they had like a 4.5 win total
Mm-hmm.
when they opened the season last year, and then ended up just this offense is too good. So they're going to hang around. And again, if something happens to the 49ers and the Rams are able to sneak into an NFC West title, like that is the type of quarterback who's going to be able to be that narrative driven guy. Stafford, like he should, man. He's one of the most fun quarterbacks to watch. He's easily one of the best quarterbacks in the league. So when you just kind of see what he has available to him in terms of that offense, like he absolutely has a shot, and he probably should be much higher than 30 to 1, I would think.
I completely agree with you.
Yeah,
Completely agree. And I don't know, like the whole thing, and we've gotten a little bit sideways on the Golf Stafford thing, where people are
right.
saying that the Lions won the trade, all of this stuff. I think that it's a conversation that eats itself. The Rams won the Super Bowl.
Yeah,
I just need let me look this up. You guys can you history buffs can look this up. The Los Angeles Rams won the Super Bowl after the trade. They would not have won the Super Bowl with Jared Goff in that Super Bowl. They could obviously if they had beaten the Patriots a little bit different. If there were a Jason McCourty play away from making it a very different game. I understand that, but the trade happened. The Rams won the Super Bowl. The Lions. That's the ultimate trump card. Like I'm sorry. I make this joke all the time, but like I know we only value processes and best practices, but like winning the Super Bowl is the goal here. But I think that the kind of resurrection over the last year and a half shows you how solid those foundations are. And it wasn't just the all-in strategy. This is post all-in strategy. They have their picks again. I thought it was interesting. We had Jordan Rodriguez on the show a couple weeks ago. She was talking about how um, the different draft strategies that they have, which they've never had to employ before, but like drafting Verse and Fisk. I combine they have such good chemistry. I combine their last names there. Verse and Fisk, where they basically said we can't replicate Aaron Donald, but we can use chemistry among draft picks, among the D line to sort of bridge that gap a little bit. They took a kid from Miami and Cam Kitchens in the third round as a safety. So they've got this young defense that's well thought through. I just couldn't be more impressed with the Rams in their post all in era and how they've gone about it. And Stafford is just going to be the kind of the crown jewel of all of it. All right, who's next for you?
All right. I mean, this is just one that it's probably not going to happen because non-quarterbacks just don't win the
Yeah,
award. But I think if one is going to, like, I'm throwing Justin Jefferson out there, and he's like at
I thought about this.
120 to 1. So the past 2 years, he has just had like half season stretches that would be great wide receiver seasons. And he was doing it in like half a game. His like second half of 2022 was incredible. And he missed a lot of time in 2023, missed 7 games, and still was just one of the best receivers in like total value also.
Mhm.
So he is just this guy. He's great at everything. So I did the Vikings chapter for the Almanac this year, and in their player comments, I kind of wrote like Jefferson's like he runs probably one of the best digs in the league, which is going to be great
Yep.
for whoever is playing quarterback to have a safety net over the middle. He's one of the best deep out runners in the league, so that's going to be great for whichever quarterback needs an outlet to outside the sideline. He just does everything well, and it's really impossible to cover him in a way where he's not going to impact the game. Like he's great from the slot. He can beat press. The way Kevin O'Connell is able to move him around and kind of get him away from press if needed to. There's just always an answer that he has in his game. So if the Vikings right now, and they are on the lower side of win totals because we don't really know, it's either going
Mhm.
to be Sam Darnold or JJ McCarthy at
Yeah.
quarterback. But that is going to go. This is going to be a narrative thing, right, for MVP. So if Justin Jefferson is putting up league leading numbers as a wide
Yep.
receiver, and he's carried either Sam Darnold or JJ McCarthy to a great offense and a playoff spot. And maybe we don't have a standout quarterback, kind of like we did this past season, where there wasn't one great quarterback season. Like that's the type of, season that I think we could see a non-quarterback win. And if Jefferson is still putting up the type of numbers and efficiency that he did, and I think he's like just quarterback proof in a way because he's so good. Like I think that's his path toward winning an MVP.
So I thought about this, Jefferson in particular. I thought about a defensive player, but I just don't
Yeah, I
I
don't
don't see a
think.
path to it. Pittsburgh's not going to win enough games for TJ Watt. The Browns, the success would be elsewhere. If they I'm saying if they won 13 games, max but the Raiders aren't going to do anything. Aiden Hutchinson had the most pressures in the league last year, but like he's just not going to get enough sacks. So I discarded that pretty quickly. With Jefferson, Kevin O'Connell has one of the best playbooks in football. He's a
Yeah.
really good coach. The soft retooling that they've done in Minnesota is not such a step back that they're gonna automatically be bad or whatever this year. They're gonna be fine. If they win an extra 3 or 4 games that they shouldn't, if they steal some games, you have to look at who's going to get the credit. It will not be the quarterback. In fact, they might play, as you alluded to, they might play 2 quarterbacks this year. It will be Justin Jefferson, and there will be no. And by the way, the national media has no idea who else on the team, no idea, and so they know the quarterback and they know Justin Jefferson, and I just feel like that is a great idea for a kind of guy. And also, I know you mentioned the 15 straight quarterbacks over 11 wins. I think if it was close, I think the media is kind of dying for a non-quarterback. I mean, it's been since 2012. That was the first year I covered the league with Adrian Peterson. I think the media would love the narrative of, oh, it's not a quarterback this time. That's why I was surprised Tyreek Hill hasn't gotten more consideration, because nobody wants to give Tua the credit. And so, fine, then something's going on in Miami. Then give Mike McDaniel Coach of the Year. So
Right.
we're not gonna give any credit to anybody in Miami. We're just gonna say, oh, this incidentally happens. That's why I'm surprised there hasn't been enough momentum with some of these receivers the last few years in kind of the golden age of the top receiver.
Yeah, and I think if it was my thing is if it was going to happen, like Christian McCaffrey had that
Yeah.
shot last year where, we weren't all sold on it being Brock Purdy. And you say like Kyle Shanahan probably should have won coach of the year also because of like that was the best offense by like EPA and production that we've seen like in decades. And like no one on that offense got rewarded for it, which was, a little puzzling. But McCaffrey in a year where like he was really good and like was the focal point of that offense. The way he is able to move around, play in the slot, do all of those different things in the backfield. Like I think if there was going to be a non-quarterback, like he would have done it. So that is what gives me hesitation about how real a non-quarterback winning is going to be. But again, if we're looking at the type of player who can do it, it's going to be someone who doesn't have the quarterback on the team, and it's going to be a player who is, I think, far and away like the best at his position, like a Justin Jefferson.
Coach of the Year is a total wasteland.
It really
A
is.
total. So what, last 10 from 2013 to 2023. 2013, Ron Rivera. Bruce Arians, great. Ron Rivera again. I'm not sure how that happened. And the 2015 Panthers were great,
Yeah.
legitimately great. But like, I don't, whatever. Jason Garrett 2016, McVay 2017, actually good. 2018 Matt Nagy, nope. 2019 John Harbaugh, deserved. 2020 Stefanski, probably deserved. 2021 Vrabel, now fired, probably deserved. LaFleur, I think, should have won one in here. 2022 Brian Daboll is just, he went 9-7-1. Come on, guys. Come on. And then Stefanski last year winning his second. Like, that's actually the most offensive. I mean, GM of the year is also another offensive award,
Yeah.
where it's like, there wasn't there a thing where like the firing rate of the GM of the year within 3 years was like astronomical. Like, it's because it's guys who push all their chips in for 1 year or get lucky and then react accordingly.
Yeah. Yeah. Coach of the year is tough because it just goes like whoever raised expectations.
Yes.
And if we have like if we think your team's going to be bad, but they're okay, that's who ends up winning Coach of the Year, which is tough because like Kyle Shanahan and Sean McVay did great jobs last year and like two of the best coaching jobs. And like we now devalue coaches when like we just think they're going to be good. And
Yeah.
that seems strange to me. Like we don't do that for really any other award, right? We don't think, well, Patrick Mahomes is going to be good, so he shouldn't be in MVP consideration. Like that, we don't do that for any other award.
We need, you know what we need? We need two separate awards. We need
I agree
coach
with this.
coaching. I think best coach and coaching job of the year are two separate things. The best coaching job of the year last year was probably Kevin Stefanski. However, if you're an owner and you are making calls to hire a coach, you have a blank check, everybody's available. I don't know why everybody's available, but they are. Are you calling Kyle Shanahan first or Kevin Stefanski? Are you calling Sean McVay first or Kevin Stefanski? Mike McDaniel or Kevin Stefanski? I don't know. I'm just saying, is Stefanski in your top 5? No. But so it's two separate issues.
Yeah, and I mean Kevin
Andy
Stefanski.
Reid. Andy
Yes,
Reid should win every year. The award should come down. It should be a 3-way tie every year between Andy Reid, Sean McVay, and Kyle Shanahan.
yeah, I agree. I wrote about this at the time where Kevin Stefanski was getting favored for Coach of the Year, and he again did a great job. He's a very good coach. Love his offense. But that was also a team built on what they did on defense. Right, that was the best defense in the league for pretty much the entire season. So Yeah, I could go on about especially the 2023 Coach of the Year standings because I took a hard stance on that. But yeah, I agree. They're two different things that we're trying to measure with Coach of the Year, and it doesn't make a lot of sense to me
Bill
usually.
Belichick won 3.
Yeah,
Dan Reeves won 2. What are we doing? Don Shula won 4. Seems like the voters are more efficient in the 70s and 60s. Actually voted for. Dude, I'm gonna tell you something. The voters cooked in the 60s. Lombardi won. Hallis won. Hallis won a few. George Allen, Tom Landry, Don Shula, Bud Grant, Paul Brown, Chuck Knox, Don Coryell. It okay. Bill Walsh won in the 80s. And then sometime in the late 80s, we just decided to give this award to the guy who took a 4-win team and won 9 games.
yeah,
Where did we go wrong? Where did I would love to know that I would love to trace this back to why we just started. Jimmy Johnson, God bless him. Jimmy Johnson won Coach of the Year in 1990 for going 7-9. I feel like
yeah.
he may have been the patient zero of this. Although someone named Jack Patera, who I've never heard of, went 9-7 and won the award in 1978. I promise you guys, I'm a pretty big football history buff. Jack Patera not on my radar. Why should you bet with Caesars Sportsbook? 2 words: Caesars Rewards. Every bet brings you closer to the types of benefits only Caesars can offer: hotel stays, VIP experiences, sports and concert tickets, and more. It's not just an app, it's an empire. So I have 2 more I'd like to throw out, both of whom are sleepers only by narrative. So the first is, are we sure? Are we sure that the media wouldn't give Brock Purdy the MVP?
I think it really depends on what that looks like, right? If it looks
You'd need
again
like an
like it
injury. You need like a Brandon Ayuk injury or holdout or something. You need him. You'd need him in the voters' minds to overcome something, and not just getting all the answers to the test.
Yeah, yeah, I think so because again, when you look at like EPA per play last year, Brock Purdy was first by a
Yes.
mile. Like
Yes.
in other seasons, if there was a quarterback like that who was that far and away more efficient than everybody else, like he would have won unanimous the MVP. But I think like because we know what this offense looks like and the boost it does give quarterbacks and the amount of playmakers that were on that. And again, like I said, I think it's fair to say Christian McCaffrey was the focal point of that offense and made things go. So I think it would very much depend on what the offense looked like. If Purdy is somehow, playing even more out of structure
Mhm.
and is doing some things that are on his own and kind of taking that part of his game up to another level, I think maybe we can start to consider that. But when we kind of look at what he's been doing is when it's the play action, he's just getting all these open throws. Because again, Kyle Shanahan should be Coach of the Year. He's very good at this. I think it's going to be tough for us to kind of get over what we believe Brock Purdy is. So, like you said, it might be a year late thing. Like we might not really be if Purdy does really develop into like this top 10 guy that some people believe he is. It's probably going to take us a couple seasons to really give him the credit if like that is really what he's doing and he is the leader of that offense.
Agree. It's funny. The Shanahan offense. Are you a golf fan at all?
A little bit, but not.
If you look into the metrics, if you're betting, Scotty Scheffler, outside of short game and putting, which is its own distinct thing, is just the best at everything. Like approach shots. Like, oh, you're not supposed to be good at every level of approach shot, right? You're not supposed to be good at 100 yards, 120, 150, 200. Like at some point, there's, oh, this guy's really good at 220 yards. No, Scotty Scheffler with an iron in his hand is better than everybody. And you cannot like massage the numbers, right?
Right.
And when I look at the Shanahan offense with Brock Purdy, it's almost a similar thing where it's like best under pressure. Oh, this guy's number 2, Brock Purdy's number 1. You mentioned EPA per play, air yards per attempt, yak per attempt, like every single thing where I'm like, well, let's look at this. Brock Purdy's just number 1 in everything. And it's Shanahan and him working in concert together. He has the answers to the test, but you still have to fill in the Scantron bubble. That's what Brock Purdy does, little Mr. Scantron. And I would, if Niners fans wouldn't kill me, I would love to coin the nickname Mr. Scantron. Anyway, I just think that there's a scenario in which last year let's just say hypothetically, last year Brock Purdy and Lamar Jackson flip in that game, and Brock Purdy has and they're different players, but let's say hypothetically Brock Purdy throws for 5 touchdowns, no interceptions, 410 yards in that game. Okay, you would have seen that momentum going forward,
Yeah,
and I think that at some point we're going to see that. I would. I don't bet on football, but if we're doing these sort of long, I had Evan Silva on this show a couple years ago, and he said something really funny to me. We did sleeper MVP at bets, and he had Josh Allen pre breakout Josh Allen, and then he had Jimmy Garoppolo. And then I remember saying to him, I said, if you had to bet one of those guys, what would you do? And he said, I bet both because the point of long shot bets is that they're long shots. And I always think about that because I don't
right.
bet that in that way. But like, yes, exactly. Like you have to just sprinkle a little bit here. And Brock Purdy's on my all sprinkle team. Absolutely. Other guy hiding in plain sight, multiple time MVP. He won't have to do much. Are we sure Aaron Rodgers can't win the MVP? With Garrett Wilson, who's been putting up great numbers with insurance adjusters, are we sure Aaron Rodgers cannot win MVP?
I'm sure he could, right? But I am not ready to dive into that because not only like coming off an Achilles injury, the last time we saw
Right,
a full season of Aaron Rodgers, he was like actively rebelling against his offense at points where if there was a play that he didn't think was going to work, like he made sure it didn't work. There
right.
was, a lot of performative deep balls, I believe, is what Nate Tice coined
Yep,
some of the throws that he made. And you just kind of looked at what he was doing in that Packers offense in his last year. And he just didn't have a lot of confidence in what was happening. And that was with
completely
Matt
agree.
LaFleur, who we've seen is very good at what he does. So now Rodgers is going to be in control of this offense. And the offensive line is better, but again, quite fragile because we have a lot of veterans who haven't really played a full season together. The receiving group is going to be okay. I mean, Garrett Wilson is great. Still want to see some other things. So it can be okay, but I'm not totally sure Rodgers has the MVP type of season in him.
Mhm.
And if there is that full, or if there really is someone in like a Matt LaFleur who is going to like get him to focus and able to be that. I think like Rodgers is going to be very much a Rodgers offense, and I'm not sure if that's the best version of Aaron Rodgers
Yeah,
right now. I think the the way they were able to like compromise a little bit in those two MVP seasons in Green Bay with LaFleur, I think that is probably what the best version should be. But if Rodgers is getting get full reign here, that I think that's going to be a little more inconsistent than I think people who like still have this version of Rodgers in their head, uh, like it. Then that's going to be like what's on the field.
my problem with 2022 Rodgers. First of all, I think Rodgers is going to get a discount from voters. I think that he doesn't have to do a lot. If they win 11 games, I think you're going to see some serious momentum there because it's the Jets, because of the perception of the roster, which is,
Right.
I think the national media is just checked out on that stuff because of the division, which I think people think is pretty deep. But my problem with 2022 Rodgers, it took too long for LaFleur to stop trusting Rodgers. Like that was the problem with the like you saw it all the time. They would have these 4th and 2, 4th and 1 deep shots, and it's like no, just get 3 yards and move the chains because I think that Rodgers, I think first of all he had the thumb, and I think that was extremely real. But I also think that LaFleur wants to empower his guys, and we saw that with Jordan Love last year. And I think he empowered him too much, frankly. And it was more like, hey, why don't we just almost run a ball control offense because Rodgers isn't right. And so I thought there was a mismatch there. I think Matt LaFleur is an amazing coach. I just think the 2022 season just got off the rails, and never got back on. I think Rodgers having ownership, if he's right, can be okay. I think it's almost Peyton Manning did this at the end of his career too. Like if an old quarterback can be the offensive coordinator, I don't think that's necessarily a death sentence. I really don't.
Yeah, I think in theory, sure. And I would rather trust even the old version of Peyton Manning, who kind of knew what he couldn't
Yeah,
do by the end. I'm not sure how much Rodgers is going to be there with understanding and accepting what he can no longer do as a 40-year-old quarterback coming off an Achilles injury. So that is what worries me about what the structure of the offense is going to be. And like you said, there wasn't a lot of checks, and LaFleur trusted Rodgers a little too much. There's no one to check him now. Like
I
he
agree. Well, yeah, and listen, I just to be clear on something, I don't see a lot of optimism about the Hackett Rodgers relationship, and I don't think this is even going to work. I'm just saying there is a path
right,
to moderate success that leads to the MVP award. That's all I'm mapping out right now. It's
sure.
like I'm trying to put a happy face on this because I do think if we're just doing paths, if we're doing the Evan Silva, of course you put everything on long shots. Like that, if you sprinkle on long shots, you sprinkle on Aaron Rodgers because there's a I don't even know what percentage chance. I don't know what the implied percentage is. I'm not that good of a gambler, but like there is a chance that this defense is able to win them games. That Rodgers has good enough numbers. Remember, Rodgers is awesome. This happened with Mike McCarthy too. Rodgers is the master of throwing the ball out of bounds, so he doesn't make a mistake, keep his numbers well. Good, like that. We saw some of that too. Didn't Rodgers like lap the field like historically in throwaways in Mike McCarthy's last year?
I
He was just
believe
like, yeah,
so. Yeah.
I'm good. I'm good. I'm gonna chuck this one to the bench where they hold the tablets. So I'm just saying there's a path. I don't necessarily have high hopes. I wish Rodgers was being coached really hard. I just think that you can't rule it out. You cannot rule it out in any way, and that's why they're a sleeper. All right, let's talk about the salary cap. So Jeremy Fowler and I talked last week about this, and it was a really interesting discussion because the quarterback market is always exploding. And it takes a little while for other positions. Wide receiver was a dead zone for years. Um, Tight end was a dead zone for years. But now you're seeing like wide receiver two. Like we know what the market for that looks like. We're seeing some movement on pass rushers, obviously. As the cap, and the cap reliably went up $10 million a year for a decade until COVID. It's going to spike even more now. And your piece had some nice charts on this. The future of spending broadly features what, Dan?
Yeah, I think again, it's going to be a lot of these quarterbacks because as you said in the piece, some of the top end quarterback contracts are not like outliers based on like the percentage of the cap when signed, but the fact that all of the quarterbacks are
Mm-hmm.
there is that's what's different now. So a lot more teams are going to be building around these quarterback contracts and then trying to figure out elsewhere where the money is going to be saved. I mean, you look at what the amount like the Burrows, Allens, the Herberts, like all of the top deals right now are they're from the current contracts. So like you're going to see that in like a Tua and a Jordan Love are coming up too.
Mm-hmm.
Like there was a little bit of like a mid tier quarterback market with like the Daniel Jones and Derek Carr, but like that's kind of disappeared again because
Mm-hmm.
now I don't think again if the Giants were able to like know what Daniel Jones was, they wouldn't be giving that contract. They'd probably just be moving on. I think we kind of saw that with Minnesota and Kirk Cousins, where there was a line where they didn't want to pay the Cousins, so it's moving on to a rookie deal. So I think the quarterback is going to be real interesting there, and I mean the wide receiver market is fascinating because it's not going the way of the running back, which again was a thing that
Yeah.
apparently was going around. But I think what we will see is these teams that have tried to build up a 1A and 1B type of
Uh-huh.
they are going to, I think, have the decisions to be made. Like we see with the T Higgins. I think Cincinnati really wanted to pay both of those guys and have a Burrow Chase, Higgins trio that led them for the past couple years. They did that by going real cheap on the defensive side, kind of hoping Lou Anarumo can get a lot of young players to play
Mm-hmm.
in that. But then that didn't go well last year. So I think they
Mm-hmm.
were like 24th in DVOA on defense. So I think they kind of recalibrated what their spending was going to be. So I think that's why we now see, the T Higgins franchise tag. And I think we're going to see him, play somewhere else. We're seeing it with Debo and Ayuk right now. Like these are guys that are going to get paid, right? But when there's a 1A and 1B, I think we're kind of seeing just the bottom line here kind of shift a little bit in whether these teams are going to be willing to pay both of those guys once they come up when it's been kind of what they've built their team around. I think like in a couple years we might see that with like a Jordan Addison, right? Minnesota wanted a number like 1A, 2 to
Mhm.
pair with Justin Jefferson. But if Jefferson's going to be making, over $35 million a year by that point, are they going to have the money to pay Jordan Addison? Like Jordan Addison will probably, he's really good. Like he'll probably get paid somewhere. But whether teams are going to be able to keep a core like that together at wide receiver, I think is going to be what transfers this market a little more when we look at what receivers are going to make.
Here's my feeling on the receiver market. I did think maybe 4 years ago when every like the ideal for a transactional wide receivers is the Vikings trade Stephon Diggs, get a draft pick, draft Justin Jefferson, right? That's what you want all the time. And I thought maybe if there's so many guys coming into the league who are really good, that maybe there gets to a point where you just say, all right, we're never going to sign these guys to a second deal. Let's just trade. You wouldn't do it, but you would just trade Jefferson for picks, then get the next Jefferson, right? And almost like what their running back is. The problem is, it's becoming like the quarterback. You just can't take that Jenga piece out of your offense. You can't.
Yeah.
And like at some and it's not that much money relative to the cap. You can float it. You just Diggs was a separate deal, but like I thought there was a scenario in which teams would do it, but it takes a lot of guts. And these guys don't want to get fired. And I remember somebody, and this isn't a Viking specific thing, but I remember someone saying to me one time, they said, every time you come up with some, off the wall idea for a transaction, say, let me tell you what GMs and coaches think. They think about their kids in private school. They think about the fact that they haven't paid off their mortgage and they don't want to have to go be an assistant GM, 3 states over. They think about the fact that they've got a nice golf club that they like, and then they just want to have an extra job for 3 years. And if they make this move and it blows up in their face right now, they lose their job like immediately. And so I think fear, as much as we like to think that the NFL is efficient, fear rules the entire league because it rules every industry in every country. Like that's just the way it goes, sports or not. And so running back, it's just so easy to plug and play because there's so many proof of concepts with that. I think with receiver, it just hasn't been tried and no one wants to find out. And I don't think anyone has the job security except Bill Belichick to say we're going to get rid of these guys a year early. And even Bill Belichick, it turned out, had not as much job security as we thought, but he had not as many career prospects as we thought. So there you go.
Yeah, and I mean, the Diggs to Jefferson transition is the ideal, but, like, sometimes you trade AJ Brown and draft
Yep.
Treylon
Yep.
Burks, and, like,
Traylon
that
Burks.
is a very
Right.
real
Yep.
possibility. But I do think, like, if
And by
we
the way, ask John Robinson if he'd like his job, or if
yeah.
he could undo that and have his job back. That's exactly what we're talking about.
Yeah, but I do think if we do see the trade a guy and draft a guy to replace him, it's going to be more of that wide receiver too. I think probably
Yeah.
if the the Bengals knew like what their defense was going to look like and what their kind of like roster outlook was going to look like at this point last year, they probably should have traded Higgins and like could have drafted a guy in the first or second round. But that's because they have Chase, right? I don't think we're going to see teams give up on those number one guys anymore, especially coming off rookie contracts, right? You're going to pay that guy this second deal. We might see a
Yep.
Devontae Adams or a Tyreek Hill if they're looking for a third contract. Maybe that's when you start to move on. You can get a little younger there. But I don't think these top flight number one guys on their rookie deal looking for a second contract are going to be the ones that are getting moved.
Dan, what else are you working on that people need to know about?
Oh man, it's been doing a bunch of deep dives going into the quarterbacks. Like you said, I had the Richardson one, also Trevor Lawrence earlier. We're doing one of those each week. Still writing a bunch of other stuff coming up for 33rd team. FTN Almanac. I'm really proud of that. It's my
Ooh,
favorite thing to do every
yeah, love it.
offseason. It's coming out in July. So this is my fifth one. Did all NFC North chapters this year. So keep an eye on that. And my favorite thing to do. I'd be reading it if I wasn't working on it. I do read it,
There you
the
go.
other chapters when I do work on it. So that's the fun stuff coming up. Like I said, never stops.
All right, we'll have you on again during the season, Dan. Thanks so much, man.
All right, thank you.